like to call this regular meeting of council from Monday, October 24th to order. On the adopting of the agenda for the October 24th regular meeting, I have an amendment to the agenda. Under unfinished business, Councillor Tripp has a notice of motion which he will put the motion forward this evening. May I have a mover on that, please? Councillor Tripp, Councillor Hammett. All in favor? So carried. So now may I have a motion to adopt the October 24th amended regular meeting agenda as presented. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Tripp, all in favor. So carried. May I have a mover to adopt the October 11, 2016 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes as presented. Councillor Tripp. Seconder, Councillor Thompson. Discussion, Councillor Tripp.
Yeah, just wanted to point out one error. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just for the gallery.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Mr. Mayor. Yes, just wanted to point out one little error on page 5, and it is, just let me find it here. It has to do with the time that was recorded there for. It would be on page 5, item B. It just says Councillor Butler returned to the October 11, 2016 Committee of the Whole meeting at 10:46 p.m.
Hold on for 12 hours.
She was still there.
Long meeting.
I think we need to change that to AM. Thank you.
Thank you for the housekeeping item. So all in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. May I have a motion to adopt the October...
I have one small...
Yes. Oh.
Yes, two. Also, and it's on page 5. It's the motion dealing with the setbacks between sites and... Yes. Thank you. It's on page 5, and it's fine. I can't read.
It's fine.
Yes, it's fine. I thought it was. It remained at 5:16.5 to 5:16.6, so it's okay.
So all is good?
All is good.
Thank you. Okay, so may I have a motion to adopt the October 11, 2016 regular meeting minutes as presented? Councillor Tripp, seconder, please. Councillor Thompson. Unless there's any discussion, all in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Okay, moving on to our councillors' reports. May I have a motion to receive all the written reports to be received for information?
Did we do the committee of the whole minute?
Yes, that was the one that was under question.
Okay, and then the regular one?
Yeah, we just did those.
Okay.
So may I have a motion to receive the reports, council reports as presented? Councillor Thompson, seconder. Councillor Tripp, all in favor? So carried. Next item would be the RDKB rep report, and there is none to report on at this particular time. So we'll move on to next item, which is information items. Subject matter, 2017 fee-for-service funding agreement request. Recommendation is council received the 2017 fee-for-service funding agreement between the City of Grand Forks and Gallery 2 at $142,000 with payment occurring on or before May 15th and on or before November 1st, 2017, and refer this request to the 2017 budgeting process. And mover, Councillor Ross, Councillor Thompson. All in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Next item, 2017 fee-for-service funding agreement request for the District Art Council. The recommendation is council receives the 2017 fee-for-service funding agreement between the City of Grand Forks and the Boundary District Art Council at $4,500 and refers the request to 2017 budgeting process. And further, that the Boundary District Art Council will be invited as a delegation to present to council prior to the end of 2016 as per their 2016 fee-for-service agreement requirements. May I have a mover on that, please? Councillor Tripp, Councillor Hammett. All in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Our next subject matter is from our bylaw officer, a memorandum update on the unsightly properties. May I have a motion to receive the information for the memorandum update on the unsightly properties from the bylaw officer? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Hammett, and now I will have our bylaw officer, Mr. Bud Alcock, do his presentation. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I brought forward to council for your consideration 5 properties that have been gone through all the stages of notification and so on. 4 of the properties I do not believe will be represented by their owners this evening. However, 1 may be. That's basically all I've got for that.
Do we have any questions? Councillor Thompson, then Councillor Hammett.
Thank you, Mr. Alcock. As the party that wants to appear before council, are you present tonight in the gallery?
I do not know.
You do not know. Thank you.
Councillor Hammett.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are you requesting permission, or do you need permission to give fines? Is that what you're reporting for?
No.
Or is it at that
I'm
stage?
No, Mr. Mayor, I'm at the stage of issuing fines, as all notifications have been given, and further we'll be seeking council's permission to remediate the properties.
That is a future
That's
issue.
correct.
Okay, so it's not being done tonight. That's
That's
not your
correct.
request this evening. Okay. Councillor Tripp.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you to Mr. Alcock, I would be wondering about perhaps seeing some visuals of these properties. Would that be possible? I guess my concern is that if council is going to be getting involved in saying yay or nay to fines or moving forward with any kind of disciplinary measures, that I, for one, would certainly like to see what condition these properties are in. So if we would be able to have some pictures, or, I mean, I'd be willing to go down to these places and have a look at them, whatever might be appropriate.
The latter would not be appropriate to visit the site, but I'm sure Mr. Alcock is prepared to give us, at this point, there doesn't seem to be any contestation of, they're not contesting anything yet, is there? Or is there an individual here? Yes, there is. Okay. But should we pursue further on the options that you had mentioned, the option would be there to see some.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor, and on the stick that I brought for Sarah to use this evening, there are photos of the properties in question.
Great, thank you. Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As one of the properties representatives are here, if they were willing to speak or wanting to speak, would it be okay to allow them the floor?
Yes, we would need a unanimous decision of council, but prior to that, seeing as your request was that you would like to see some pictures, they are available, so let's see the documented proof. Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I may, for a minute. When we get to this stage with all the letters represented and sent out, this is when we give the property owner the opportunity to speak to their property and where the issues lie. So this is why this lady is here today.
Absolutely, I understand. So, but we still could see the photos. Is that,
That's correct.
Yes, and then at least we could, once the statement is made by the homeowner, we see what we're talking about, so everybody's up to speed. Councillor Ross?
Okay, just a second. No, you just turn it on.
Why isn't this working? I don't know, but this is supposed to come.
It is on. Well, your green light was on. Okay, now.
I know how it works.
Obviously.
Just as a matter of respect and security for the properties and the owners in question, is it appropriate to show photos when there's a live stream on the internet? And I'm just wondering if, while this is being showed, if we should turn off the live stream that is online, just as a security measure for the people who own this property. That would be my suggestion as we turn off the camera. We're showing people's personal properties.
Yeah, that's probably a reasonable request, seeing as we don't have any legal representation here, so we're not aware of how it works. So if we could request.
I'll just cap the camera. It's not live, by the way, but you're right.
Well, you know, regardless.
So the camera can't see anything.
Thank you. Okay, you may proceed.
Mr. Mayor, I believe this is the property that the owners are here this evening. Photos are listed numbers 1 to 4. And it may say on there, open with Windows Media Player or Windows Photo.
I can use it.
Photo viewer.
Photo viewer, Windows Media Player.
That is a picture taken through a bramble hedge. There was one unlicensed, unregistered vehicle in there, as well as some other debris on the far side. Let's say the same thing again.
Can you maximize that?
Should be able to just go next.
Just hit the next one.
It's not set up.
Oh, okay.
That is taken from the west side, southwest side of the property. Again, another unregistered vehicle. There's also 3 snowmobiles back there, and a pile of other debris, as well as building materials. And again, that's just more debris in the backyard. There's also 2 other vehicles in the front yard, but I did not take pictures of it and wanted to identify the property per se.
Councillor Thompson, then I have a question also.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the Bylaw Enforcement Officer, the vehicles in the front, are they being used?
I believe when I was by there this afternoon, there was 5 vehicles, and I believe 3 of them were being used. 2 of them I believe were not. One I know is not.
Not that the question has any relevance, but I'd just like to know, is there any adjacent properties or any neighbors?
Yes. One home under construction on the northeast side.
Have there been any relevant complaints from these property owners?
Mr. Copan?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there has been a few complaints from other people that live in the Johnson Flats area that travel past that place daily as they make their way into town. And that's where it had speared this on. This was also an issue that has been running for about 1.5 years now.
Okay.
There was numerous vehicles in that yard. The owner has removed several vehicles, but there's still items there that really do need to be followed up with.
That was my next question, longevity, and you've already answered that. Councillor Tripp, thank you. Mr. Copan.
Yes, through you to the bylaw officer here. The pictures that were taken through the hedge, were they taken from the adjoining property?
No, they were taken from the road, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Mr. Mayor, if you wanted to allow the person to speak, so we'd have to put a motion on the floor to do that, and it would require unanimous.
we'll address the other properties because you have more pictures from other properties, is that correct?
Yes.
Or are we just addressing this one this evening?
I believe just the one we're going to address this evening, Mr. Mayor,
Okay.
because the others have been in contact with me, and we have given them some extensions.
Okay, thank you. So may I have a motion to allow the individual to speak? Councillor Tripp, Councillor Hammett, all in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Go ahead, ma'am.
All right. I'd kind of like to start off with the letters I received.
Would you please be able to identify yourself first for the record?
I'm Lori Ledwar.
Thank you.
I got first notice. I've been out of the country for the last few months, and so I have just received these on like Wednesday or Thursday. that I picked these up. The first letter highlights about the vehicles. And so that's what I had presumed. The issue is the vehicles. Okay? So when he's talking about the things in the yard, that has absolutely nothing on here identifying that. The second notice that I received on the same day is actually identifying 2 properties, one of which is not mine. And I'm wondering about confidentiality. I have somebody else's information. I want to know where my information is. And is confidentiality an issue with the city? Is it important? Okay. I don't have a problem, I don't have an issue with the vehicles. They are being dealt with. I have come to ask for an extension because there's nowhere here saying that I can do that. And what this is telling me is I have to appear today, period. And it gives no information as to where or what time or anything. I came to the city office today to ask those questions. So I'm having a really hard time with spelling mistakes. I'm having a hard time with 2 different properties. I'm having a hard time identifying exactly what the issues are, especially after the verbal report. So, yeah, what can you do for me? What can you do for me?
So you have stated you've been away out of the country for a few months.
Yes, I have.
But the report is the factual statement by our bylaw officer that this has been going on for a year. Is that affirmative?
It has been going on a lot longer than that. My husband passed away 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago, and I don't know if there was a bylaw enforcement officer at that time, but Mr. Copan actually came to my home. Actually, I received a letter, and he came to my home about a week and a half later to speak to me. And at that time, pretty much everything was cleared out. There was left the 3 vehicles that you're talking about. They are my children's that have been given to them from my husband. And they are now in the place of being able to deal with that. So I have approached them in the last couple of days since I've received these, and one of them lives out of town, and the other 2 are here, and they will be dealing with these things over the course of the next month or so. Yes, go ahead, sorry.
When you said Mr. Copan came to see you, was that over a year ago? Because we were talking about it.
Yes.
So, and you had mentioned that there was no bylaw officer, but in fact there was a bylaw in place. Were you aware of the fact that there was a bylaw in place?
Yes, I knew the bylaw was there. Okay. And we have had several discussions with the city, with our lawyer, and that was always dealt with. So there wasn't an issue that I was aware of until this letter came, and Mr. Copan came to see me. And at that point, the vehicles were mine, they were my husband's. When he passed away, I had no need for this hobby that he had. And so I cleaned up the yard, and many vehicles are gone. Like I said, there are the 3 that are remaining. 2 of the vehicles that were mentioned are my personal vehicles. One of them I drive in the summertime, and one of them I drive in the wintertime. The other 3 vehicles that are in the yard, that 2 do move under their own power, 1 does not. And like I said, they were inheritance for my husband to my children, and they are working on getting those dealt with.
I just failed to see the timelines here. There's been over a year, and yet now you're getting citations put towards you, and you're having a question with that. So is your intention to have the property cleaned up? And
yes.
If you're looking for an extension, how long are you looking for?
I'm hoping for a month. Like I said, I just got into the country.
Okay.
And when I picked these up, jet lag was huge. I am just starting to feel better now. And yeah, I wouldn't have been here today, because if this was last week, I wouldn't have been able to function to do this.
Okay.
So yes, I'm absolutely.
So basing on your statement, you can assure the city that within a month it will be all cleaned up?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's all I have for questions for you. Councillor Tripp and then Councillor Hammett, or vice versa, who was first Councillor Hammett, then Councillor Tripp.
The concern I have, I understand you're going to have the vehicles moved, but as you explained, you were cited several years ago for the same problem, and you did clean up the yard.
Mm-hmm.
By looking at those photos, I'm just wondering, since you were already familiar with our bylaw, why it got back to that stage again?
It never got completely cleaned up. It never got completely cleaned. There was never, like I said, this letter states, highlights, I asked specifically, what is the issue? Like, what are the issues? Mr. Copan said, it is the vehicles. So it is the vehicles that I dealt with. As far as the rest of all the other stuff, it was so overwhelming at the time, I could barely do the vehicles. In this last year, things have been better. And I did do a huge amount of work on the yard, cleaning up junk and stuff. Like I said, the first letter I have, what's highlighted on here, unsightly premises, is about the vehicles. It has nothing to do with anything else. And to me, that was, unless I'm to assume something else, I'm assuming that's what it is. That's what's highlighted.
Councillor Tripp, and then I have another question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In looking at those pictures and knowing where that property is located, because I've actually been there, I really fail to see any grossly unsightful premises there. I do understand that Mrs. Ledwar has had a deceased husband who was who had a hobby of working on cars, and when someone has a hobby like that, they obviously are going to need to have car parts and and various things around. I know that Mrs. Ledwar has been out of the country. I certainly can attest to that, and because I know where she's been, and she's been overseas for several months. And so I really do feel that it would be appropriate to at least give her the month leeway to work at getting the vehicles removed off the property. And as she says, if other issues were not addressed in the correspondence that she received, how would she have any way of knowing how to move forward with remediating those things? So if the bylaw officer chooses to move forward on those things, then I think that would probably need to be the next step in the process.
Before Councillor Thompson, I have one question which is a bit concerning to me. You had made a statement that this had been over a year ago, and at that time there was no bylaw officer. With all due respect, did you...
No, I said I didn't know whether there was one. Mr. Copan is the one who came to see me.
Yeah, so did you feel, I mean, this is not an accusatory statement, did you feel that because there was no bylaw officer, you felt there was none, that this was going to go away and just be not dealt with?
Not at all.
Okay, so you were aware of the fact.
I was really impressed with Mr. Copan coming to my home and speaking to me personally.
Okay.
Because again, the letter was very ambiguous as to what exactly the problem was, and he made it very clear what the issue was. And the issue at the time was vehicles.
And Mr. Copan stated to you it was just the vehicles?
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mrs. Ledwar. I understand that you've been away for a time. Would you be willing to work with our bylaw enforcement officer to deal with what he is concerned with, in addition to the cars? There could be some other things that need to be dealt with as well.
Yes, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine.
Those issues that he presented are already on that list to do that. I ran out of time before I left in the spring. In the summer, I had already started an enormous cleanup in my yard at that point, and I ran out of time to get these other things done.
So if I understand this correctly, you were prepared with a month extension, you would remediate this problem and work with bylaw officer to solve the problem, and we can put this to sleep?
The vehicles for sure. The rest of the stuff I can't promise because of the way the weather is right now. But it is absolutely on my agenda, and if it doesn't get done this fall, it will get done in the spring as soon as the weather clears up again. I mean, my concern is it's raining and it's going to freeze. I'm going to be needing a jackhammer to take things out of the ground, is what I'm saying.
Would it be not more pertinent then to remove the other items first and then use the vehicles later, which can be towed away or moved away before anything freezes over, so that the loose items are gone?
Well, you know, if I would have known that, I would have presented that for an extension. I didn't know that. So I have no problems doing that. If that's what you're asking me to do, that's fine. I can do that. All I know is that it is not all going to get done in this month because I don't have the ability to do it.
So then let this council know how long it will take to get this done, but next spring is not really a viable option.
Can I give you a date for next spring?
That would be up to council. I do not feel comfortable with that statement. Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm hearing what Mrs. Boudoir is saying, and I also appreciate and respect the work that our bylaw enforcement officer is doing as well. I believe that by working together with Mrs. Boudoir to deal with the most pressing of issues and to give her an extension of 1 month is not unreasonable. And should the weather change and the snow fly, then I don't think it's unreasonable to ask her to complete the cleanup in the very early spring. You know, I mean, she's been away, she's trying to deal with things, and she's only been back a week. And I just don't think that as a council, we need to add additional duress onto her at this time.
Councilor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with Councillor Thompson. I understand what I'm hearing is that she will make an effort. I don't know if we need a resolution to allow an extension, or can we, I don't know how that, do we have to have a resolution for an extension?
Yes, absolutely.
And that in good faith that the city will work with this Mrs. Ledwar, prioritizing the cleanup between now and freeze up, and then after freeze up, after in the spring, that you will continue to bring your property into an order, so that we all agree that this is no longer considered an unsightly premises. So I would like to, in good faith, put forward a resolution that we offer Mrs. Ledwar an extension up to I'm up to April 30th of 2017, with the caveat that the vehicles need to be removed.
Councilor Ross, if I may cut in, I'm sorry. We would be setting a precedent here because, as Mr. Alcock has said, there are other
No, it's a
case-by-case
situation. Mrs. Ledwar's come to us, and that's the beauty of community action and community governance, is that we can work with individuals based on their individual needs. Mrs. Ledwar has been very clear about her personal needs, and we're dealing with the personal needs. In 1 month, that the vehicles be gone, and that by April 30th, the rest of the property is completely cleaned. And that is my resolution.
I concur with your suggestion, but I would go one step further and leave it, as we have done with other property owners, up to the diligence of because this is operational, and we leave it up to our bylaw officer to see that if the homeowner is complying satisfactorily to their opinion within the month. Should they in a month feel that it's not even close to being compliant, then we will have to go back to this. Is that acceptable, Mr. Copan?
I believe that that's probably the best solution.
Yes, because it's operational, it's in your hands. You make the judgment call. We will give the month extension if you feel within a month. This would be my recommendation to council, that the homeowner is complying satisfactorily to your and moving at a pace which is satisfactory to bylaws. Then we'll put the matter to sleep.
No, absolutely, I agree with that 100%, because it is weather dependent at this point. We are so late in the season. If there's a few items that get delayed, we'll play that, but everything is discretionary.
Exactly.
And it depends the availability of people that can move the stuff for you. Do you have a truck hauler?
Yes.
There's a lot of things involved with it. So we really have to take every individual one.
Exactly. Everything is not always in the letter of the law,
I just don't
so
want
it's
to
up.
be penalized if things.
There's no penalization at this point, because like I just mentioned, our bylaw officer will come back to council to let us know what the status is. If the status has gone south, then we have a problem. So are you comfortable with that?
That is wonderful. Absolutely.
Perfect. So we will go with the 1 month to start with, and then we'll see where it goes. And need a motion.
Because you have Councillor Ross's motion, you have to either ask for a seconder or she can withdraw.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would put forward a resolution that Mrs. Ludwar be given until November 30th, 2016 to remove the offending vehicles from her property, and that we ask our bylaw enforcement officer to give us a report at the first meeting in December on the status of that particular property. And then we can perhaps work with a view of how much work has to be done and establish a second date at that time.
May I have a seconder on that? Councillor Ross. Councillor Hammond, did you want to discuss anything? Because I noticed you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand what Councillor Ross was saying in the fact that you didn't want Mrs. Ledward penalized, and I agree. The fact that she is here tonight and we're extending the 30 days. The other 4 people are not here tonight, but we do have the bylaw in place. And the way I look at it, and I'm not trying to be hard-nosed about this, but Mrs. Ledward admitted that she started cleaning up last April, and my concern is that if we extend it into April like you're suggesting, that's a whole 12 months. And I know you've been out of the country, but that's 2 months out of 12. So between the time you started in April, although you probably could have started before then, but until the time you left, I think that if we give an extension of the 30 days and then have Mr. Copan report back, or Mr. Alcott report back after 30 days, and we delay any penalty or fine, would suffice at this point for us, because otherwise we're getting too involved with bylaws and their operation.
And that's what I'm asking for. I'm not looking for an extension to the spring, or not anything concrete, because my plan is, now that I have a brain again and I'm functioning again, is to get into my yard and do the cleanup that needs to be done. My concern is the freeze that's going to be coming and how much I'm going to be able to get done by that time.
Right.
And so,
I'm sure Mr. Copan and Mr. Alcotter will be quite discretionary with their decisions, and I feel that.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, and again, may I repeat, the only reason why is because of the precedent. If we extend it too long, that it can cause for the other individuals that are still not here to see it.
If I were in your shoes, I'd be doing the same thing. So I understand what you're saying, and I don't want to be unreasonable with it.
We don't want to open a Pandora's box that we can't close.
And I know what my responsibility is as well, and I don't have an issue with that whatsoever. So I still do want to talk about my confidentiality, though. And I want to know what's going to be done about it. This is a breach. This is a breach of confidentiality.
Yes. I would suggest you forward all that information and discuss it with our CEO, Mr. Allen, and he will look into it for you.
Okay.
Is that satisfactory?
No, but it's the beginning. Yeah, it's the beginning.
Well, we always have to have a start to have a finish.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table. All in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Thank you. Moving on to our bylaws section, subject matter from our Chief Financial Officer, bylaw number 2034, 2017, the Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw. Recommendation is council gives 3 readings to bylaw 2034, 2017, Revenue Anticipation Borrowing Bylaw. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Thompson. Seconder, Councillor Ross. All in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. To our Manager of Development and Engineering Services, subject matter Johnson's Flat Wetland Protected Natural Area dedication. Recommendation is council gives the third reading of the proposed Johnson's Flat Wetland Nature Park Bylaw 2035-2016. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Hammett, Councillor Thompson. All in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. We didn't do the unfinished business. So before we go any further, we will revert back to our unfinished business, item 5. And the subject matter is the notice of motion by Councillor Tripp, which now will be put forward because it's had its resting period for the motion to be presented. Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. I'll just go ahead and read my motion. Whereas gathering pertinent financial and other factual information about community events hosted by the city and its volunteer groups is beneficial and recommended in Policy 503, Community and Organization Support, Events and Community-Oriented Services, and in the interests of determining where the city could better support the volunteer efforts of groups and clubs that generate interest in Grand Forks as a destination, therefore be it resolved that staff prepare a detailed report on these events, including how much they cost the city, with an estimation of revenue that was generated for the business community from these events, and staff will also canvass organizers to receive suggestions for improving these events and provide a report to council early during the next budgeting process.
May I have a seconder?
I'll second it for discussion.
Councillor Thompson, discussion. Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm very aware of just how much the volunteer community and element is important in this city. There's so many events throughout really the entire year that are dependent upon and driven by volunteers. I just really feel that were we to find ways of perhaps helping different volunteer organizations that are struggling, especially as our population gets older and volunteers, as we've heard quite regularly lately, are really getting burnt out. So the things that make this city just wonderful to live in are potentially at risk of drying up. And I just would absolutely hate to see that happen. I believe that our volunteers really should be championed and just given every opportunity they can. And I remember at one meeting that we had a number of months ago, Councillor Hammett made a suggestion about having maybe some sort of a volunteer expo or fair. I know this is done with the service clubs for the young people. They have a volunteer where all of the different service clubs get together and they canvass for people who will come and volunteer for those different clubs for the young people. And I thought, wow, what a fantastic idea. Why couldn't we do that for all of the other groups that need adult volunteers around town? And it got me thinking, and what came to mind for me was, hey, why couldn't we do something in the spring that would have all of the different service clubs and organizations coming together under one roof, where they could promote their various activities to the community, and they could recruit for volunteers. We possibly could combine that with some other attraction. I was thinking maybe like in the spring, it's people are getting ready for their gardens, so maybe we could have some like garden show or something like that at the same time. Something that would help newcomers to the community find out what's going on. I know when my husband and I arrived here, we didn't have an idea of all the different volunteer organizations that were out there, and I'm sure we still don't know half of them. You know, we know certain ones, but if we had some sort of an event, say in the spring, that was under one roof for all of these clubs and associations to recruit, I just think it would be a fabulous idea. It would give them the injected help that they need, and getting a picture of where things are at from the staff would give us a starting point. So that's what I'm throwing out for discussion.
I agree with your second portion, but the first part, I have concerns in allocating this kind of task onto staff for all the extra timelines involved. I would think a better avenue might be either through Community Futures or a Chamber of Commerce to check with the DBA to look into what the merchants' gain was, as you said. As far as the city's costs, a lot of it is in kind, and also we have to look at the remuneration that the community benefits by these events and the message that is sent out by the people that organize these events to entice future events to come. I don't think this is not like a balance sheet where we have to have a bottom line here, because it's very hard to establish a bottom line on something like this. The remuneration is vast for the merchants and for this community. So, and I just feel uncomfortable subjecting staff to this kind of extra work to establish possibly something that will not be concrete enough to be valid for any final discussion. Councillor Thompson and Councillor Hammett.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I believe that the in-kind for events is a section of the budget, if my memory serves me correctly. But I don't think it's broken down event by event by event. It's just an overall total. And I think I understand where you're coming from and why you're asking for that, but I think that's, I would prefer to see what the overall total is, and perhaps a listing of the events that were serviced under that budget item. And then the Downtown Business Association could, and I'm sure through Councillor Hammett or our CAO, comment on the benefits that they receive, both monetarily and other. I just hesitate asking specifics.
Before our CEO addresses, I have another concern, which is the fact that this is a privacy issue too. There may be merchants that will be reluctant to reveal that information. I mean, we cannot enforce onto merchants to release how much profit they made, etc. This is something of by choice. If they wish to relinquish that information, that's their prerogative. It's not something that they're obligated to do. To our CEO, Mr. Allen, and to our Councillor Hammett.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things that we do during the budget process is we do have a report from our Deputy Corporate Officer that does provide an overview of the amount of money that goes into in-kind and what we put into the budget annually. Unfortunately, I think we only had one person attend the open budget deliberations that we had last year. During I believe there was about 6 or 7 open sessions, and we had one fellow attend. But at the end of the day, the Deputy Corporate Officer will provide that. Now, another piece to that is the overall breakdown. Different events require different things at different times during the year. For instance, the ball tournament will provide a certain amount of preparation. In preparation for the parades, we do a lot of prep work in preparation for the Canada Day events, whether it be the Good Sams and the extra mile that we'll go through there. I think, though, that we will break that all down into the in-kind piece. Council doesn't necessarily provide out cash to these events, but you do provide a considerable amount of support to these groups in the public forum. So I would just say that we'll have that for the budget deliberations, and we'll have a review of that during the 2017 budget deliberations, and Council will get a better picture of that there as we move through that.
Councillor Hammett, and then Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I put that in my report a few months ago because I sit on some of these committees and know how difficult it is to get volunteers to participate. We're going through that right now with our Halloween event, and that's the problem with with any group is we have great ideas, but getting people to step up to the plate and actually come and help is, and with this group, we're dealing with merchants that are running their own businesses, so it's very difficult. But nonetheless, the reason I put that in there was a suggestion after the fall fair, because I know they were struggling with volunteers, and I worked every day at the GFI this year. We did this 3 years in a row. I think it started in 2008, and it wasn't hosted by the city. It was a private person that put this on, and we called it Get in Line for 2009. Don't be late in 2008. And we invited all of the groups in town, the nonprofit groups, under one roof for that day, Saturday, and it was at Pearly Gym. So there was Air Cadets, there was Girl Guides, and there was Boundary Babe Ruth, the GFI, the Boundary Horse Association. So not only were they signing up volunteers for their groups, they were signing up new recruits for soccer and for all these activities. So parents could come with their kids and get them all set up so that they knew what they were doing in the upcoming year. And also these groups could get their volunteers on board as well so that they had a sense of where they were going. I think this would be better suited for Community Futures, the Chamber, and this is why I put it in there, because I think it should be suggested to the Chamber and working collaboratively with Community Futures, possibly. The Downtown Business Association is it's a limited group with limited boundaries. It's just downtown and they're all business people. But the Chamber represents everybody throughout the boundary and all the businesses throughout the boundary. So I feel that's where that could possibly be taken. As far as the first part of the resolution, I think it's a make-work project for staff, and it's time-consuming. You can ask individual event coordinators to report to the city, if you so choose, on how successful their event was, or the ups and downs, or what their needs are. But until they approach the city, I don't think we should be chasing them down, because I think our staff have city business that they need to deal with, and our volunteer groups and our city are totally different groups.
Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I appreciate the comments that have been made. I just did also want to point out that Policy 503 does actually have a provision in it for taking a look at what the different events around the community are costing the city in kind and so on. So it's certainly not outside of the scope of the policy that's already on the books. And I guess the other thing I'm thinking is, planning, if we don't, there's that expression, failing to plan is planning to fail. And my concern, and I really appreciate what the councillors are suggesting here that we don't want to do. Certainly we're not asking for a make-work project for the staff. If there was some way that perhaps the resolution could be modified so that it would include the parameters of Policy 503 and not overburden them. I guess my real concern is for the volunteer organizations that may need some extra support, whether that's in kind from the city, whatever that looks like, because these events really are what people come into the community and experience and then decide, wow, this is a great place. And I think we just need to keep in our minds, and whether that goes to Chamber of Commerce, I don't know how we could, ask them to move something like this forward. But I just would like to see this not just drop.
Councillor Rose.
I don't know if we have a line item in our budget, I can't remember, for special events. We already have a line item, so we're going to be clear about what that line item is for what it was for 2016, how much we spent, and then assess how much we want that line item to be for 2017. That being said, sometimes there are events that have been initiated by communities and volunteers in the community volunteers and organizations, and those events or activities have a life of their own. And they start off and they're really, really successful and everybody has enthusiasm for them, but after 2 or 3 years, people are saying, oh, okay, I did that last year or the year before, and I'm not going to do that anymore. And they sort of take on a life of their own, and sometimes, for lack of a better word or phrase, they also take on a death of their own. And it's really not up to the city, it's up to the volunteers and the organizations themselves. And it's hard for them to do sometimes, is to say, we're not going to have that event anymore. And the reason they hold on to them sometimes is because those events are the only thing that actually gives those organizations their reason for being. And then by letting go of the event, it means they have to decide what they're going to do with their organization, and that's a really difficult thing for them to do. So they hold on to an event that's failing, burning out the volunteers, when really the community's moved on from that event. So I really don't see any point in the city saying, your event is struggling, how can we work to make it more successful for you, when really it's something that was only for a time and we need to let it go. I went to the Harvest Festival this year up at the Boundary Museum. Oh my goodness, that's a fairly new event. It was over 400, I think 450 people were there from 10 until 4. It was fun. It was such a fun event, and that's a relatively new event now in the city. That's getting increasingly popular. So maybe that's going to be for a time, but it's it's an important event, and it is run exclusively by volunteers. So I like to leave those events to the organizations, and those organizations have to decide whether or not they're going to continue with them and let them go, and come to the city and ask for the support on a case-by-case basis.
Councillor Hammond.
Yes, I agree. The city actually only has 2 events that we conduct ourselves. One is the Family Day in February, and the other one is the Christmas Light Up at Gyro Park. Outside of those 2 events, the city doesn't organize or run any of the other events that are run by different organizations or volunteer groups. But if they do require help, they will come to the city and ask for help. So it is on a case-by-case basis. If we were to go out there and ask all of the volunteer groups, all of the event coordinators to come to us with their needs, I think we could be incredibly overburdened, because everybody's going to want money, and where do we stop? Because like Councillor Ross said, some will burn themselves out. Some events will start out because somebody thought it was a great idea, but find that there really isn't the interest or the participation, and they will die a natural death. Or they can't get the volunteers or whatever, but maybe they're not meant to be. But if we start taking on some of these and funding them, how do we not take responsibility for them when they fizzle out and have groups come back and blaming us for the failure for their event? You know, we're still hearing that from Fall Fair, because something happened 45 years ago when they had their land down in the industrial land, and it's like, okay, it's been 45 years, like 50 years.
Can we call the question?
So I'd like to call the question now.
Just have it read back, please,
Yes.
so we know what it is. We've had a lot of discussion.
Whereas gathering pertinent financial and other factual information about community events hosted by the city and its volunteer groups is beneficial and recommended in Policy 503, community and organization support events and community oriented services. And in the interest of determining where the city could better support the volunteer efforts of groups and clubs that generate interest in Grand Forks as a destination, therefore be it resolved that staff prepare a detailed report on these events, including how much they cost the city, an estimation of revenue that was generated for the business community from these events, and staff will also canvass organizers to receive suggestions for improving these events and provide a report to council early during the next budgeting process.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion is defeated. We now move on to questions from the public and the media. Again, may I caution everyone out in the gallery that the questions have to be relevant to the subject matter on the agenda this evening. Having said that, fire away. The gentleman in the back.
Les Johnson, GFTV taxpayer, at one time community volunteer award winner. Not so much a question, but a comment. I applaud you for what you appear to want to do. It would be good if the city was able to understand what's effective and what's not, and do it in a way that doesn't cost us a lot of money. That's the hard part. As a number of people here have said, there are organizations within the city that might be better attuned to what's going on. The unfortunate thing is that Community Futures is going to know about things that Community Futures related organizations are doing, and the Chamber of Commerce will know the things that businesses are doing, but what are the nonprofits doing that don't approach or are not members of either of those? Neither of those organizations will be able to tell you what they're doing because they're not members. As somebody who's run an event calendar for the city for the last 8 years in one way or another, one thing I can tell you is that it's a continual exercise within the people who put things on and have venues where things are put on to try and figure out a way to plan this so they don't step on each other, so they're not parasiting each other or cannibalizing each other's memberships or possible draws because they have something on the same day. And they don't seem to have a way of coordinating this. They don't have an organization. And maybe that would be the best thing. It's something that's not solidly in the business community or in the political arena or the civil service arena, but some sort of organization where the people who are actually doing these things can get together every week or two or whatever and just exchange ideas and see what works and what's effective and maybe pass on information in an organized fashion. Because frankly, there are a lot of people who try to do things and maybe don't know how to do them well. And one thing I've heard almost every year, I hear this many times since I've been here, is from people who put these things on is, you always see the same people at these things. Mm-hmm. And they get burnt out, or they die off, and they leave big holes. And because of the way things go around here, or don't go around here, those holes take an awful long time to be filled. And it would be really nice if there was some sort of everything organization or loose club where people could get together and talk about how do you attract volunteers, how do you manage volunteers, and how do you put on events effectively. And then they'd be able to possibly tell the city, well, look, this is actually going to be a good thing, and we don't need an awful lot of help, but we could use some help, and do it in a way that the city could see the effectiveness and utility to the city without breaking the bank. That might be better than, believe me, I like the city for a lot of things, but city initiatives, as far as I'm concerned, are only as good as the next election. That's it, period. Once the next election happens, they can disappear like that because the political wind shift. And that doesn't do us as a community a service. It just, like, takes us back into the ditch, so to speak. Anyways, congratulations for trying.
Having made that statement, Mr. Johnson, there is one option for any group or organization. They can present themselves at a committee of the whole.
Yeah, that's true.
Present their case and make their statements.
You're right.
And so the city will then have an open ear for that.
And if people are paying attention, maybe that would be a conduit to their ears.
Exactly. Exactly. The avenues aren't all closed. They are open. It's just they have to be taken. If nobody takes the avenue, they're not going to get anywhere.
You're right.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I just remembered that several years ago, but before I retired, Martin O'Brien tried to establish a volunteer group of volunteers for varying organizations and events, and I don't think that worked out very well for him.
Yeah,
I don't think that many. I don't. Do you remember that one?
I wasn't really part of that. I kind of remember hearing something about it. I know that he had a lot to do with the United Way before it cashiered in here. But one of the things about these things is, and for being on boards, I can tell you for sure, personality has an awful lot to do with whether these things sink or swim. And you may have all the greatest ideas, but if you have crap for personality, try getting people to go along with you. But you may have a great personality as long as you have somebody around you that can actually channel your personality into effective things, and it makes it good. So it's a bit of a crapshoot, and that's one of the things I think a group like that could help people with who run these organizations, is how to do it in an effective manner. It's like Toastmasters. Most people aren't born being able to talk in front of crowds, but they can learn.
Councillor Ross.
We have job fairs. It'd be interesting to have a volunteer fair where organizations that are looking for volunteers can set up and people can go around, especially newcomers, and see not only what clubs or organizations are in the community, but where they can slot in. And you know, when like the GFI, Canafest, and the Harvest Festival, for example, you know, just naming three events that we have in the city. When they put an appeal out for volunteers, they get volunteers. And I think people are enthusiastically volunteer because I really want to be involved in those events. And I think that we can gauge the enthusiasm for the number of people that step forward to volunteer as the amount of enthusiasm for the event itself. If you're looking for volunteers for an event and everybody's like, nah, no, then you can sort of gauge that lack of enthusiasm for people to volunteer as how much enthusiasm the community is going to have for your event. Because volunteers do want to have fun too. And if they don't think the event's going to be fun to volunteer at, then people aren't going to think it's fun to attend.
Any other questions or concerns? Councillor Thompson.
I'd just like to give Councillor Tripp A for effort on this. You know, I think that it's, you know, we've had a really good discussion on this whole issue, and you know, maybe something can come out of this with the community as a whole.
Like a volunteer show, like a volunteer. So you're suggesting?
Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just one plea then, you know, for some volunteers to come forward to maybe create something like a volunteer fair, because I think that would be really beneficial for the community.
So without further ado, may I have a motion? Now we have a question.
Gloria Cook.
Go ahead.
The question is still not really addressed, I don't think, about the taxpayers' concern over the cost to the city of these different events. I think that was part of the and the accounting of that. What do these events cost the city? Nothing.
I believe it was addressed. There's a line item in the budget.
Okay.
So the line item is not individually identified, but there's a line item.
So it's not individual though?
No, that would be way too much of an undertaking. And what would be the bottom line outcome for that? What would be the necessity of that is the question. If it's not making money, would you then tell the coordinators or the organizer of the event not to come back to Grand Forks? That would not be very prudent. Absolutely not. So that should pretty much answer that. So, may I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Ross, seconder, Councillor Thompson. All in favor? This meeting is adjourned.